What is the Red Sox rotation going to look like in 2026? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and thank you very much for clicking on this video. Don't forget, we are still raising money for the Movember Foundation, a foundation dedicated to raising men's mental and physical health awareness and services to men all across the globe. Our goal is $3,000. We're making some headway, but we're not there quite yet. So if you want to help us donate, the link will be in the description. And if you do donate, you are automatically entered in for a chance to win opening day tickets for 2026. A really fantastic prize if we're able to hit that $3,000 mark. Last Monday, we made a video predicting what the Red Sox were going to do for their offense, right? The trades, the signings, all that good stuff. I wanted to continue that trend going and try and figure out the other sort of big pain point for a lot of Red Sox fans right now, and that is what the Red Sox rotation is going to look like in 2026. So we're going to go through what I think the Red Sox end up doing in terms of trades, in terms of signings, and in terms of other things to improve their rotation for the next season. And where we have to start here is where the Red Sox rotation is currently at, because right now I think this is sort of what the Red Sox rotation looks like. Now, I put 6 people on this list just to sort of give you an idea of what the depth of this team could look like, but right now we know that there are going to be 2 guys in this rotation, right? We know that Garrett Crochet, despite anything that gets done this offseason, is going to be at the top of this thing. He's going to be your number one. He's going to be your ace, unless the Red Sox trade for like a Paul Skeens or Tariq Skubal, which I guess there have been rumors about both these guys so far, but I don't think that's going to happen. Crochet is going to be at the top here. The other guy that I think is almost definitively going to be in this rotation is going to be Brayan Bello. Right, I get it. There have been issues with Brayan Bello this last season, especially towards the end here, but I would say 90% of the way through the year last year, Brayan Bello was a certified mid to top rotation type guy. Now, outside of that, it's a lot of who do you like for depth? Right, basically that's what it is. The Red Sox have a ton of options. To me, it's probably Hunter Dobbins, Conley Early, and Cutter Crawford rounding out the 5, with a guy like Richard Fitts or Cooper Criswell being that 6th sort of hybrid type starter. How did the Red Sox improve this? Well, last season, the Red Sox had Lucas Giolito, right? And Giolito was fantastic, but Giolito was sort of in between Bello and the rest of the rotation. For the Red Sox to get better, they need to find somebody who's in between Crochet and Bello, right? That's how you improve. You improve the top of it as opposed to improving the middle of it. And that's where our conversation starts. And to figure that out, let's first start by taking a look at the free agent market. Now, to be honest with you, there's actually a ton of intriguing starting pitching names on the open market. I think if we're looking specifically at how do the Red Sox improve the gap between Bello and Crochet, there are only really a couple of names here that will definitively be able to do that. One of them, I think, is Framber Valdez. Has absolutely the capacity to be in between Bello and Crochet. Valdez is a dude that eats inning really well. He's had multiple seasons where he's looked like a real Cy Young candidate, but there are a couple of things that give pause, especially to Red Sox fans. I think the big thing here was that whole thing with his catcher this last season, right, where he threw at his catcher, and it was just sort of a bad teammate type of look. I think it's turning a lot of people off from the idea of Framber Valdez. The second thing is his price tag, right? He's going to be around 5 years, $150 million. Now, the second guy that I sit here and say would probably definitively be between Bello and Crochet would be Dylan Cease. He's shown again that he can eat a lot of innings, that he can be a top pitching talent in the game, finishing top 5 Cy Young voting in 2 of his last 5 seasons, but he is coming off of a bit of a down year. And while the talent is still there, he's projected to get a 7-year, $189 million deal. To me, those are the 2 dudes that you sit there and say, if the Red Sox sign those guys, you could comfortably put them between Garrett Crochet and Brayan Bello. That doesn't mean there aren't other options on the free agent market, just that the other options have some question marks around them. I think if we're looking sort of at the number 3 candidate right now, it is actually Japanese pitcher who's coming over at just 27 years old by the name of Tatsuya Ime. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I probably didn't, but this is a guy who is dominant in Japan. This is a guy who's young, who's talented. If the Red Sox are going to spend money on anybody, I could absolutely see them going for a guy like Ime. Then you've got players like Michael King, who is a prime example of this, sort of has the potential but not a guarantee, mostly due to his health. Sort of the same boat with a guy like Brandon Woodruff, Zach Gallen, Shota Imanaga, right? They feel like they have the ability to get there, but recently haven't been able to do that, although I still think Shota ends up being more more of a number 3 than a number 2 type pitcher. Basically, what I'm saying here is that despite there being a bunch of interesting options on the free agent market this offseason, in order for the Red Sox to truly improve this rotation, to get to where we want them to be and where I think the Red Sox want to be as well, it's going to cost them. It is going to cost big dollars. Even a guy like Ime is probably going to end up being a pretty expensive and lucrative contract. So you sit there and you say, is this realistic for Boston? Right? Are the Red Sox going to spend this kind of money? And I do think it's possible they spend this kind of money, but I think if they're going to spend money this offseason, the focus is going to be on a bat. My first official prediction in this video is that the Red Sox, they don't sign any of these big name free agent starting pitchers and instead turn to the trade market in order to get what they need. And what does the trade market look like? Well, let's talk about it. Predicting who the Red Sox actually trade for is going to be a bit impossible because unlike last year where Garrett Crochet was the clear, by far and away, best option on the trade market, there really isn't that guy this offseason, right? At least not yet. Usually things play out a little bit and situations become a bit clearer, right? I mean, there's conversation about Skubal right now. If he gets onto the trade market, he'll be the clear best trade available for the Red Sox, but there are a ton of different options right now who are all kind of in a similar category. I'm talking guys like Hunter Green being rumored to get some looks this offseason, Freddie Peralta getting some looks this offseason, Joe Ryan is 100% going to be a name brought up this offseason. Guys like Sandy Alcantara, even guy like Jared Jones or Bubba Chandler of the Pittsburgh Pirates, maybe a guy like Mitch Keller, right? They're all sort of in this same boat of, yeah, there could be conversations about him. Yes, they could be a potential player, but I don't know if they're going to be available. However, this is a prediction video, right? Which means I have to make a prediction. And to me, my mind just can't get away from the idea of Joe Ryan. The Red Sox were very close to landing Joe Ryan at the deadline last year. So close, in fact, there were graphics posted and things announced that it did happen for a split second. To me, that conversation just doesn't come to an end, right? That doesn't just die on the vine. If you were that close to landing this guy, I think the Red Sox, from their point of view, are absolutely still in on the idea of bringing Joe Ryan to the Boston Red Sox. And I think it's for a couple of different reasons. One, he's under team control for 2 seasons. So the Red Sox would be trading for a bit more than just a one and done type player. 2, while he did fall apart a bit basically right after the deadline, he still had a year this year that indicates he could be potentially exactly what the Red Sox are looking for. I mean, it was a very good ERA number for him. It was a very good FIP for him. He was a great ERA plus type guy. And I think what we saw with the Twins in general last season is just sort of the type of team that was put together really well, that didn't perform super well, and then ended up, you were playing for a team basically that said, look, you're not making the playoffs this season. We're selling basically everybody. I mean, they were the big sellers at this year's deadline. A lot of guys on that team had a much worse second half after the deadline than they did first half, which kind of makes sense, right? I don't know that Joe Ryan is this type of pitcher that can't pitch a full season and is more so just on a bad team in a bad situation. And number 3, and in my opinion, one of the more important things about this is that this year, Joe Ryan proved that he can be a starter for a full season. That was a bit of an interesting conversation coming into 2025, but this year he was able to throw 171 innings over 31 games. So you take a look at it and you say, this feels like the kind of guy the Red Sox already have had conversations about and could absolutely use in this rotation. So what does a trade actually look like? It's still not going to be very cheap to get Joe Ryan, right? He was an almost 5-WAR pitcher this season. He still has a couple of years to control, and we know that he was going to cost a lot at the deadline. The assumption is going to cost about the same coming into the 2026 season. So this is not going to be an easy trade for Red Sox fan to digest. It's not going to be an easy trade for the Red Sox to make. Personally, I think the package looks something like this. I think it looks like the Red Sox trading Jarren Duran and Brandon Clark over to Minnesota to get Ryan in return. And I know people don't want to see Duran go. Personally, if there is a way for the Red Sox to hold on to every single person on this roster, I'd be absolutely fantastic with it. But the problem is, there just simply really isn't. Again, the Red Sox are going to have to spend money on bats, preferably 2 bats. At least, at the bare minimum, you need to fill the Bregman hole, and you need to add another bat on top of that, whether that's with Bregman or somebody else. There's not going to be a ton of capital to go and just simply give away money to these starting pitchers. You're going to have to give up talent to get somebody somewhere. The Red Sox outfield is probably the best place to do that, especially when you're talking about a guy who could end up being a number 2 in your rotation for, at the bare minimum, the next 2 seasons. So whether it's Duran, whether it's Abreu, whether it's, say, Don Rafaela, the Red Sox are going to have to bite the bullet, and Red Sox fans are going to have to bite the bullet with one of these guys no longer being on the team. To me, Duran, in this specific situation, makes a lot of sense. The Twins, while yes, they did sell a ton last offseason, while yes, they did not have a good season last year, aren't incredibly far away from being a legitimately competitive team, especially in the AL Central. They get a guy to go along with Byron Buxton and potentially Royce Lewis, right? If he could stay healthy, I think you legitimately have a pretty solid lineup here, and I think Duran could be exactly the guy to do that. They still have pitching depth. They still have names in that rotation that if they lose Joe Ryan, they could potentially still sneak out a wild card or even a division, especially playing in the AL Central, which is why personally I think Duran is the most appealing here. Again, it could be Cedon, it could be Wilyer Abreu, but I think it's going to cost one of your major league outfielders to get Joe Ryan. Now, I added in Brandon Clark here because, well, it helps the Minnesota Twins pitching pipeline. He's one of the more exciting pitching prospects the Red Sox have, and he's not too far away from Major League Baseball, which could be appealing. But that name could be replaced with a couple of different guys, right? I think Tolley could be a name that ends up being in there. I think Perales could end up being a name that ends up being in there, right? You got a couple of different options, but to me, I would prefer the Red Sox part with Brandon Clark before they part with either one of those guys. So yeah, the package, it's going to be tough. It's absolutely going to be tough to let go of anyone, but at some point you got to give something to get something. However, what does this do to the actual Red Sox rotation? Well, personally, I think it looks pretty good, mostly because it's my prediction, right? But it ends up looking like Garrett Crochet at the top, Joe Ryan right underneath them, with Brian Bayo at the number 3, and then a battle for the last 2 spots. To me, this is a clear 1 through 3 improvement on what they had last year, and that is ultimately the goal right now. I think the Red Sox are incredibly high on Conley early, and that he's going to get a legitimate chance to not only break camp with this team, but stay with this team for a majority of the season, especially if he ends up staying healthy. However, right now, I'd put Conley early at the number 5, and that's mostly just because he's the most inexperienced pitcher that the Red Sox could possibly put in this rotation. The second obvious name is Hunter Dobbins. I think he did enough last year at the bare minimum to fight for a spot in this rotation and does end up snagging that 4 hole. I think Cutter is in the mix here as well for one of those spots, right? Could it be Cutter instead of Dobbins? I could absolutely see that, but I think with the fact that he had so much time outside of Major League Baseball, they're going to end up mixing him in as this sort of hybrid reliever / 6-starter type, role in the Red Sox organization, right? These last spots are going to be kind of interesting and up in the air. I mean, you've got other names like Harrison, Tolley, potentially Perales, potentially Kyson Witherspoon at some point too. I think one of the sort of underlying goals of the Red Sox this season is to improve the top end, but also let the back end breathe a little bit. Does that make sense? Sort of allowing this back end of this rotation, instead of filling it up with guys like Walker Buehler or even a guy like Patrick Sandoval, instead of doing that, they're going to use it to develop these prospects, to develop a Tolley, a Perales, early Witherspoon, right? And sort of hopefully get to a point here where at some point this season, your number 4 and 5 starters are potentially outperforming a guy like Brian Bayo. Right, so you're set up for not only this season, but also coming seasons as well. And I think that's ultimately going to be the goal of the back end of this rotation, which is why I'm so heavily on the idea of Conley early being in the back end here, because it not only allows him to get some major league innings, it also doesn't put him in the spotlight, right? Brian Bayo, opening day starter at 25 years old, is a little bit different than Conley early, number 5 starter at 23, and sort of building himself into, can he be a number 3 starter? If you come into 2027 with Brian Bayo as your number 4 starter, you're in a really, really good spot. I think that's what the Red Sox are trying to build for here. So ultimately, this is what I'm looking at for the Red Sox rotation coming in at 26. Crochet, Ryan, Bayo, Hunter Dobbins, Conley early, and then Cutter Crawford as that number 6 guy. Obviously, there are going to be a ton of injuries. Obviously, there are going to be guys who don't break camp with the team, so this could change a whole lot. And then I think a guy like Richard Fitz and Cooper Criswell potentially could end up being that sort of 7th, 8th type starter for the foreseeable future. But that's just my opinion. Personally, I think I did a good job at improving the top line while also giving the back end room to breathe. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Red Sox need to get more than one guy in here. So let me know all your thoughts. What are you thinking for the Red Sox rotation? Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? me. Let me know. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.